Hello, this is Silas. I'm back again with Stephen. We're here for part two of reading of the magnificent Maze expository fortifying of trusted humanity article from the Time magazine called "This." I use his name, "The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign That Saved the 2020 Election." So, Stephen, say
Saved.
what's up.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you again.
Okay, getting into it now. Okay, so Stephen, tell us a bit about why we're reading this. We've done part one already, and then I'll just kind of tell the people the kind of way we're going to be doing it, and we'll get right into it since we've already done part one, as I said, where we go more into like our thoughts and stuff with it.
Sure. So as I said in the previous video, this is one of those articles that I stumbled upon after reading an excerpt from it. I didn't even think it was a real article. I thought somebody was making fun of it or it was satire or something. It's an article basically explaining how the establishment, quote unquote, fortified the 2020 election to help Biden win. So in other words, it's basically, don't worry, guys, it's rigged in our favor, but don't worry, we're doing it to save democracy, essentially. So the way this article explains is that it gets into it. It says, summarize sort of the last part, basically, okay, yes, there were rich and powerful people who worked to help Joe Biden win the election, but don't worry, this is in the name of saving democracy. It's in the name of protecting people, blah, blah, blah. So what we did was we read the first part of it with some of our own commentary, and then we're going to pick up partway into it.
Yeah. So with this one, it's like I was kind of wondering, like, what is the background? Why would they do this? And I think I have this kind of idea. There's this video I posted. I was watching the things unfolding post-election, and there was the first time I was watching live. I think it was a Georgia or something like that. It wasn't Georgia. It might have been. It was Michigan maybe. But there was one of the ladies was presenting when they first presented the video. I think it was Georgia for the video from the center that was looking down onto the people pulling out those cases from under the table, and she was being asked, like the woman was like, okay, so what does this? One of the Democratic legislative people there was like, what are you talking about? Like, what's going on in this? And then the lady who was presenting just said, you're looking at the room, and that stuck with me. And I think that's what's happening is right now. These kind of things are not news. The fact that the only new thing is that we can see it going on as it's going on. That it's news as it's going on. These are things you normally hear about years after the case. Oh, now we come back and it says, okay, now we're actually going to talk about like with this one, like the secret history. I'm like, this is something still ongoing. The impeachment trial for what happened on January 6th is starting tomorrow as we're recording this. So like the secret history of the shadow campaign, the campaign is going on. They're still messaging. They're still doing these kind of things. They're still tying on the unity type of thing. So for me, I'm wondering, what is this? Is it a victory lap? Is it a thing where it's like, okay, there's so much information out there that we might as well get ahead of it? Like we know the information is like, this is X. Problems occur not because of what X is, because of how you define X. So some people are defining X as Y, the pro-Trump people. These people come out and say, okay, we can't deny X actually happened. So it's not Y, it's Z. So that's kind of what I was thinking with this might be what it is, and it might be part of it where also some of these things might be brought up in the impeachment trial. And I was thinking there's a chance that they knew about some of these things being brought up. So they decided, let's get ahead of that and actually start framing it in a certain way. So you look, this is the lens you should actually approach this content that actually happened in. Because like I said, with that room, when you're looking into those people pulling out those things, they're literally doing that. But now instead of saying, oh, it's a fraudulent, it's them doing fake ballots, it's like, no, that was some brave people in this informal handshake who felt the need that this has to be done for Joe Biden. We can't let this go. So yeah, it's past the date of actually, it's past the time of counting, but because we are brave and we have to do this for Biden, for our democracy, and make sure it's a good thing, we have to stay in here and take our time and count these totally legal votes in this totally legal kind of way after. That's kind of, I think, what they're trying to frame some of these things in.
Yeah, and I made the analogy last time. It's like when the Catholic Church offered indulgences like, oh, give this money, it'll get your family member out of purgatory and into heaven. But don't worry, it's for their benefit. And it's like, wait, you're taking from average people to enrich yourselves. Oh no, don't worry, it's for some greater benefit. It's the same basic thing. I mean, governments always do this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with this one, the way we've been doing it is we're just kind of reading paragraph to paragraph, or if it's a short paragraph, we read a couple, and then I read one, then we discuss it, and Stephen reads one, and we discuss it. And we went to the first section. It's a rather long article. There's going to be links somewhere by this, where you're listening to this or watching this, where you can actually pull it up. There's a few things I wanted to mention that in some of the discussion, I'm trying to be very specific with my terms, and I do understand some of these things. It's just they mean one thing and it's something else. Like I'd mentioned, there was Ricky Vaughn who had been arrested for doing some kind of thing where they found up to 4,000 people watched his memes about sending a text message vote somewhere, and then they might have not actually ended up voting. So he got arrested for that, including some other things.
Yep.
And I mentioned this Democrat comedian of Asian descent. And I checked the video that she had posted. I think that video was posted on November 8th, which is after the election. So that might be part of why she's not considered to be a similar thing as that. I'd mentioned also the Really Queen thing. This is more of a smaller thing. And if you watch the actual video of the last one, it's on the screen. I did a correction in there, but I wanted to mention I said it was like transgender, and I said crossdresser. For transgender, crossdresser is different from drag queens. These were drag queens. And it's really funny. It's from like the RuPaul drag. There's a RuPaul kind of America's Top Model type of thing, but for RuPaul drag race.
Yeah.
RuPaul's drag race, and there was somebody on there from it, and she got popular. I'm forgetting the name of the actual individual that. Yeah, this is the thing. This is a question for drag queens. Since they're not transgender, you still call them he. Like, is RuPaul called him, or when RuPaul is dressed up as RuPaul? You refer to her. You refer to RuPaul as her, but the man himself who dresses up as RuPaul, if he shows up on a show, it's he. Do you know this?
That's a good question. I don't know.
All right, if anyone knows, I'll probably look it up after this. But if you're watching and you know, just let me know in the comment section. So there was another thing in here as well. I think there's a prop here. I was picking up something that they said here. Now I'm going to get the article up on the screen now. There was a part where I think they were talking about how every attempt to interfere with proper outcome of the election was defeated. And I was being very specific here and saying they're being loose to that. Every attempt to the proper outcome, we talked about a proper outcome that they're using certain language to bias you, I think to bias you towards a certain way. What is the proper outcome? The proper outcome, the legal outcome, or Joe Biden winning? What is it? And I was picking on them for saying every attempt here, since, first of all, every attempt and to interfere. Was it an attempt to interfere? Was it an attempt for them to also think they were to get it proper, but to you it's improper? So there's all those things, but I think they might have that.
Remember too, one of the opening paragraphs about, liberal groups prepared for protest, right-wing militias prepared for battle. It's like, it's already framing that as protest. Oh, they're just going out waving signs around. Battle. Oh, they're going to go out with guns and, shoot people or something. And it's like, it's being framed in that way. But like I said, in reality, all these riots over the summer were peaceful protests. And then, there were not buildings, businesses being destroyed when Biden won. So,
And even with that, I think they might have, the reason they put the numbers, hundreds of left-wing people around, and then the right wings were prepared for a battle. I was wondering why they didn't put the number of the right-wing militias. I think they meant that the people on the left announced what they were going to do, the liberal groups, and then in response, the right-wing militias were preparing to battle them. I think that's what they were kind of thinking there. And here, I think when they say every attempt, maybe they meant every attempt to interfere, because every attempt they thought was going to actually change this proper outcome post the election was defeated, because the proper outcome still came, and the proper outcome they had in mind was Joe Biden being sworn in. So to them, every attempt to interfere with Joe Biden being sworn in, which they think was a proper outcome, was defeated. So in their sense of it, it was defeated. But in my sense of approaching this as them not being attempts to interfere, but them being questions coming up, like I said, that Georgia video, like that hasn't been addressed yet. So they might consider the presentation of that video to be an attempt to interfere, but since it didn't interfere with Joe Biden being sworn in, they personally feel it was defeated. But for me, it's still a big question mark, and for a lot of people, it's a big question mark. And there's content I think that's coming up in here that's a big question mark, and that's part of why I think they feel the need to actually even write this article. But I don't know. So anything else?
No, that's it. We can jump right in.
Okay. So we're going to jump in, and this is the next section, is the architect. As I mentioned, part one's already there. You can go to that and get our thoughts and ideas on that one. We might probably refer back to it as the article goes, but here we go. So I'll just lead off with the first two paragraphs, since the first one's kind of small. Okay. The architect. Sometime in the fall of 2019, Mike Podhorzer became convinced that the election was headed for disaster and determined to protect it. This was not his usual purview. For nearly a quarter century, Podhorzer, senior advisor to the president of the AFL-CIO, the nation's largest union federation, has marshaled the latest tactics and data to help its favored candidates win elections. Unassuming and professorial, he isn't the sort of hair-gelled political strategist who shows up on cable news. Among Democratic insiders, he's known as the wizard behind some of the biggest advances in political technology in recent decades. A group of liberal strategists he brought together in the early 2000s led to the creation of the Analyst Institute, a secretive firm that applies scientific methods to political campaigns. He was also involved in the founding of Catalyst, the flagship progressive data company. Okay, go ahead.
Well, notice the words carefully. Its favored candidates. It doesn't say the people's favorite candidates. And like they were talking, one of my friends brought up during the primary, think about like Bernie was ahead, then all of a sudden Biden's winning. It was similar with Hillary, and you're like, wait a minute. And then, you know, they basically gave Bernie money, bought another home, and kept quiet. So, you know.
Yeah.
But
Kamala Harris, how well was she? How well was Kamala Harris?
She was like low single digits, like what, like 5% or something? Like, you know.
She was one of the first people to drop out of the primaries.
Yeah.
So how popular was she? But she was brought on for particular reasons, and I think maybe they think because this person is involved with the unions, they're just assuming that unions are for the workers. So this is really what the people want. So that's already enough. And another question is here: they just come out, they say the secretive firm. If you have to keep secrets, what are you hiding? If you have nothing to hide, why are you secretive? Why can't you just be out in the open in some of these things? So it just shows how some of the claims that they make, and I'm glad there's certain things I'm not going to buy in people anymore talking about how like we are for change, we are for the kind of people who are different. This is a country ran by old white men. Like no, like you chose to go with one of the person who has been voted in, one of the oldest, I think the oldest.
Yeah.
He is the oldest. I think he's the oldest. I think had the longest political career before he was actually voted in.
Yeah.
He's white. He's wealthy. So to say that, this is what we're against, and then you pick exactly that, for me, that's already like, okay, if you say you're against nepotism, I don't believe you anymore. You were already backing Hillary Clinton, who had been Secretary of State, who had been the wife to the previous president. Then now you came in and then you said, okay, now we're going to go with the older vice president who's ran from. No, you don't care about these things. So I'm not buying some of these arguments anymore. I can just completely just brush them off, and unless somebody shows to actually have been consistent on some of those things. But for now, I'm glad there's a massive chunk of things that you can just be like, okay, that's no need to actually pay that any more lip service anymore. You don't have to give that too much mind. That's off to the side.
Yeah, I mean, as we discussed right before we started this, the believe all women thing, it's like you don't get to go after Trump and Kavanaugh. You know, Tara Reid comes out, look the other way. CNN even deleted that episode where her mother called in off their website. She called into Larry King. They deleted that. Things like that. It's like, and then now it's AOC, I've been sexually assaulted. Oh, believe all women. Guys, you're full of shit. You can't explain to me, unless you can explain to me there's some reason, but it ultimately just comes down to, no, your guy is accused, so you're looking the other way. As you said in a previous video, if you're consistent, if you say, no, we have to believe any woman who comes forward, okay, there are issues with that, but at least you're being consistent to your principles. But otherwise, no, it's obviously a strategy to discredit one of your opponents.
Yeah, and again, I'm not stating that this is a bad thing. This is a natural human thing. But there was a case, and there was that question mark, and there's still a question mark. We could still be completely wrong about this content. We could get to the end of this article. You out there listening might have some way of actually reading this that we're not understanding and not getting that will show that we are actually on the wrong, that this actually was a fortification, that this actually is a positive thing. This is not this is not the abyss that I was pretty sure that has existed. Like this is not like, hey, you remember that swamp you were talking about when we told you it didn't really exist? Well, now we've created this kind of Disney park ride through the swamp where you're going through on this ride and there's all these tricks and all these things and these animatronics and all this nice music. It's still the swamp, but it's not that bad of a place. That's kind of what I'm thinking this is. Maybe it's not. Maybe this is just some healthy water that we're supposed to be drinking and swimming in and it's not irradiated. Maybe that's what it is. But I'm glad at least that we're being shown what it is. Like to me, it's like I'm just glad the information is there. So if
Yeah.
you have nothing more to say, you can lead us off for the next
Nope.
step, the next
All right, I'll
paragraph.
go right ahead. Let's see here. The endless chatter in Washington about quote unquote political strategy, Podhorzer believes has little to do with how change really gets made. Quote, my basic take on politics is that it's all pretty obvious. If you don't overthink it or swallow the prevailing framework whole, he once wrote, after that, just relentlessly identify your assumptions and challenge them. Podhorzer applies that approach to everything. When he coached his now adult son's little league game in the DC suburbs, he trained the boys not to swing at most pitches, a tactic that infuriated both their and their opponents' parents, but won the team a series of championships. So yeah, I guess I don't know. Did you have any thoughts? What he's saying there, it almost reminds me a little bit of like playing poker, like the strategy as far as bluffing versus taking a risk when you should, and like that's kind of what it sounds like he's describing here. What do you
Yeah,
think?
it's practical. It's a
Yeah,
practical thing. It's human nature. It's looking at the different things. It's part of why social media companies and these things are that make that much money. You might say, oh, they're not profitable. What are they actually selling? How do they actually maintain to be these millions of
yeah.
dollars? They're selling data. They're selling information. They're selling behavioral patterns because people understand. People don't spend the Super Bowl just happened. They don't spend all that millions of dollars in actual advertising because they don't think it works. They realize that stuff works. They
Well,
know
because
that. They have that perception. So
sorry, go
this
ahead.
guy is very practical. He's being very practical about it, and he's like, look, if we behave in certain ways, certain things are going to happen. You just question them, question your, identify assumptions, and challenge them. And then that goes to one of the questions that one of the phrases or quotes that I really like from Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged said, contradictions don't exist. If you think you're facing contradiction, check your premises and you'll find one or more of them is wrong. And I think that's a similar thing. He might agree with that. He might not personally agree with Ayn Rand's philosophy and things like that, but that phrase and that statement itself, I don't think he would deny that. As he says here, after that, just relentlessly identify your assumption and challenge them. So if you think something is happening a certain way and you assume it's happening because of that, keep testing to see if that's the reasons it's happening or if this is limited and then challenge them. And I think that's a good way to approach life.
Well, I was explaining to my dad what you just said about social media companies because he was asking me about fees on some of these stock trading apps, and I was saying that they're free. And he was saying, how do they make money? Well, I know with Robinhood, they deal with hedge funds and they actually sell them data on what people are buying so they can sort of anticipate. So it's like that's how they make money. They're like, okay, we'll do business with you. Give us this much money. We'll report our customers are buying this much. This much is going up by that much. So it's like they can sort of anticipate, oh, a lot of people buying into this, all that. And then with Facebook and stuff, as you mentioned, it's the same thing. It's like they're selling your information to advertisers who then in turn are targeting you. It's like that's how they make money. So officially, it's quote unquote free, but they're finding ways to profit off of what's being done there. And again, it's not profiting off of your money. They're not taking you're not paying them and they're reinvesting your money. It's they're taking the information and finding ways to monetize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's and that's what money is. People get too transfixed on money itself as some side of wealth when it's a representation, currency and money. Those are representations of the actual time, of your time investment. It's kind of something that says, okay, I'll do this, and then instead of having to take the literal good, the physical good, the actual service, I can use that to be more flexible in which other services I actually purchase and obtain and exchange for this thing of value that can be used in different ways. That's the thing of it. So with this one, just being on Facebook scrolling around is not you paying them. But it's still a service that's being provided. It's still time being provided. There's still something in there that some people can get some value of, just the behavior, the data. So there's all these kind of transactions, and we're constantly in a process of being the employer and employees. It's just this trade is always going on, and I'm super excited about the next series we're going to go through, the human action. It's just everything. Everything is the economics is not just financial economics. It's everything. It's just the decisions we make, the exchanges we make, the decisions we decide to take, and the things we do and the things we don't do. That's constant, just economic kind of ideas and calculations and activity going on constantly in our lives. And it's kind of a magnificent thing, but people can use it for different reasons.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so here we go with the next one. Trump's election in 2016, credited in part to his unusual strength among the sort of blue-collar white voters once dominated the AFL-CIO. This one small pet peeve with the AFL-CIO. I don't think they actually mentioned the actual what the acronym stands for earlier. Normally, when I'm writing, the first time I mention something that has an acronym, I'll make sure I write it out in full. I'm guessing it's probably American, I don't know, the F League, CIO. I don't know.
Trying to
It's good about.
think now. Yeah.
If you look it up,
Yeah, yeah,
you
sure.
look it
Sure.
up.
You keep
Somehow.
you can keep reading.
Okay,
I'll
yeah.
look it up
Keep
too.
reading and tell me after. Okay. Trump's election in 2016, credited in part to his unusual strength among the sort of blue collar white voters who once dominated the AFL CIO, prompted Podhauser to question his assumptions about voter behavior. He began circulating weekly number crunching memos to a small circle of allies and hosting strategy sessions in DC. But when he began to worry about the election itself, he didn't want to seem paranoid. It was only after months of research that he introduced his concerns in his newsletter on October 2019. The usual tools of data, analytics, and polling would not be sufficient in a situation where the president himself was trying to disrupt the election. He wrote, "Most of our planning takes us through election day," he noted, "but we are not prepared for the two most likely outcomes: Trump losing and refusing to concede, and Trump winning the Electoral College despite losing the popular vote by corrupting the voting process in key states. We desperately need to systematically red team this election so that we can anticipate and plan for the worst we will know will be coming our way." Okay, let me just first.
All right. So AFL is American Federation of Labor, and then CIO is Congress of Industrial Organizations. So it's one thing. So
Okay.
Federation of Labor, it's the unions, and then
Industry and
industrial.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Sorry, what's it?
Yeah. Okay. So industry and labor and
Yeah.
like as I mentioned before, from my general idea, we're all laborers. Just I don't like this language that people use. Working Americans. Who's not a working American? Show me a CEO that doesn't work.
Yeah.
That person's not going to be a CEO for too long. Who's not a working American? So somebody flipping burgers is a working American, but somebody who's running like is somebody who's working on Instagram is an influencer on Instagram. Are they a working American? Is a YouTuber a working American? Those people also do work in their ways.
Yeah.
Work is literally just anything that employs your time that you actually have to put in some effort to do. Are athletes not workers because they
Yeah.
make millions of dollars? Like, what's going on with these kind of terms? It's disgusting. Right here, right here. These people, these people, these bastards. They said, despite losing the popular vote, who cares about the popular vote? The popular vote has nothing to do here. By corrupting the voting process in key states, see, Trump losing and refusing to concede, and Trump winning the electoral college, i.e., winning the presidential election, because that's what you're actually using to actually win the presidential election. The popular vote has nothing to do with this. If you want to count popular vote for actual individuals, then why don't you count popular counties? When you have a situation where this one was like 3,500 counties for Trump to like 500 for Biden. We
Yeah.
don't count that because it's not the popular county vote. It's the
No.
electoral college that counts. So don't, this popular vote thing is inane. People need to stop talking about it. It's nonsense. It's dumb. There's many people who live in red states who are Democrats who know there's no point for me voting right now because it's not going to flip my state. There's many Republicans that live in places like New York City and LA that don't vote because they realize it's not going to flip this. It's not going to flip this city. It's not going to
No.
flip this state. So you have millions of people who probably would vote if it was an actual popular vote type of thing, who decide not to for various reasons. So just stop with this popular vote nonsense. It's dumb. It's childish. Just stop it. It's pointless.
Well, did it? Well, I think it was you pointed out in a previous video that if Hillary didn't get California, there were like three cities, areas in California that if Hillary hadn't gotten those, Trump would have won the popular vote the other
Yeah.
time. So it's like, when they talk about California and New York deciding the elections, this is what we're talking about. But it's like, should a few people in areas that just happen to vote blue outweigh everything else? I mean, so you have
Because
one,
it's not just California and New York.
yeah,
It's like San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco Bay Area,
yeah,
New York City metro area. Then I think there's like one more place on the East Coast kind of area that there's. Then there's the Chicago kind of area. Those
yeah,
are the places which are densely populated, and they get millions of people. This election also came down to a few counties with major cities in it that
Yeah.
had a lot of people come in. Philadelphia was one of the cities where it had some issues. Atlanta was one of the cities that was up for it. So you have these kind of places that carry. You look at the map of California, as I said, with the counties. You look, there's a few blue islands. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. If you take those out, those were the few. It was three cities that accounted for
Yeah.
that plus 3 million vote difference in the popular vote that Hillary had over Trump. So if you look at the rest of the nation, Trump won the popular vote in that kind of sense. But the popular vote doesn't count in this situation. So
No.
stop this nonsense.
Yeah,
What
and
else?
my issue in this paragraph too, the way they're framing it about blue collar white voters, which is stupid because we know this last election, Trump got more support among minorities. What is it, like the most among any Republican since like the '60s or something? Yeah, so this girl I went to high school with posted after the election, "Oh, thank you, people of color." It's like you don't know what you're talking about. He gained support among people of color. He lost support among white people. It's like,
Yeah,
it's like
and that's
if you're gonna you should almost say thank you white people for helping Biden, if anything.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in this sense, we are of course going to be discussing some of these figures. Just saying like, okay, we're going to accept the figures that are announced, whether you think those are the actually accurate figures or not, because there are some questions where it says, okay, if you are going to actually go into a situation where you do some of these shenanigans, who would be the most likely group that you do it? And probably white males, or there's more of them, so it's kind of easier within those groups of people. And
Yeah.
that's just kind of a thing where it's a majority white country, so those are the figures that would be likely most able to tweak and change in certain situations. In my from my experience, just being a practical type of person on that. And these white people would talk about how, oh, some people, I call these people in the salt right and the more nationalist type of places who go more like the race identitarianism and things like this. And I've mentioned before, socialism, communism, these things were not invented in Africa or Asia
No.
or Latin America. These things were
Yeah.
invented in Europe by white
Yeah.
people. So,
Yeah.
so don't give me that whole idea like, oh, you look at European countries, they're socialist as F.
Yeah.
Who's doing that? It's not the immigrants coming in and changing
No.
those countries. Those countries aren't as diverse as the United States of America. So don't give me that mess. Like
Yeah.
Russia was that way by itself.
Yeah.
Don't give me that mess that we need some kind of like, homogeneous kind of population to have some kind of glorified place. Because China is homogeneous as F. They're
Yeah.
also a fascist state.
Yeah.
Like so this whole thing is just stop it, stop it.
Yeah.
People are better than that. It's the ideas that we have, and some people are not able to do things. I'm not able to just go jump and dunk a ball like LeBron James. But that's a physical aspect of it. There's some people who can play chess like Bobby Fischer or something. I'm not going to be able to pick up and learn and play chess like Bobby Fischer. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen anytime soon. So there's certain limitations that we have, but these are human actions. It's human actions. Some things can be learned, some things can be improved on. We have certain limitations, but this whole just broad brushing any kind of way is just it's an absurdity to me. And we were talking about the people. I think this also came up. I think like Eva Longoria came out, and one of the groups that actually did have of the minorities that actually did have an increase for Democrats was Latina women. And she was coming out. She was like, "Yeah, the black women were doing something in the last election, but this time the Latina women they came out, and that whole thing of like adding the accent when you're normally speaking in like her regular American accent, but when she comes to Latina like rolls
Yeah.
the just things like that. I think they also do it. Sometimes people do it when they're talking like Muslim. They're like, I'm speaking regular Muslim, and then you go
Yeah.
to like,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Okay, but she came out and said that on some radio show, and then a few days later, she had to come out with a mea culpa and be like, like the black women, they've been 95%, they've been carrying the party for so long, but I just was proud as a Latina who I thought like, okay, we're doing this. This whole thing, they're eating themselves now. This whole jockeying for position, because as you mentioned, every other significant demographic in the numbers that have been released, which is part of why there's so many questions, is he's did so much better and improved in so much places. The bellwether states for the last 5 or 6 elections, there's been 19 counties that normally showed who won. Like whoever won the majority of these
Yeah.
19 normally won the election. Joe Biden won one out of the 19 of them. But again,
Yeah.
this comes to the people like Podhauser who were doing that data search. They actually did it and were like, look, we have this many people in these kind of metro areas. We look and saw Hillary Clinton carry the popular vote by these few cities. So can we tweak that and change it to work on the electoral college? And that's what I'm saying. This might be explaining those discrepancies that I was seeing, that are literal discrepancies that I had questions about. And this might be the answers for why that actually happened. And If they did it on the up and up, I don't care. They took the win. They
But
were
then,
better at
but
politics than Trump's team. Like it happened. It could have happened just that way. But
But
yeah,
this is where I sort of get annoyed though, because I remember when we were questioning all this stuff, people, including some friends and family, were like, "Oh, Biden won fair and square. How dare you question this?" I was like, "Well, this is what an independent thinker does. You see things that don't add up, you ask questions. If you can give me good explanations like some of this stuff, okay, fine. Maybe there's something I didn't know. There's something I didn't factor in." But for all these things to favor Trump that typically indicate a winner and him still losing, doesn't add up. Yeah,
yeah, and that's
yeah,
the same thing that
yeah,
the pollsters, they could have been using faulty polls or whatever,
yeah,
but so many people were confident that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and
yeah,
they were surprised because Trump used a different system. He was looking at different data and did different things to end up getting his electoral college win last year. So that's
yeah.
the same thing right now. Trump's team and people like me and other people could have been watching other things and not realizing the effect that social media had, the effect that this secret cabal of people were doing, and this kind of thing where we don't have to worry about those bellwether states anymore. We can
Yeah.
activate people in a different way and have people sent in. Those are things that we just could have been looking at a different thing, and these people took advantage of other abilities to actually have in the game. And this is what happens when you have competition. This is what happens in life. Things go up, you compete, you win, you lose, and you move on. But you still want to actually analyze and see, how did the person win? How did the person lose? Like, what can be done in the future? These are things that I like doing, and I think we benefit from doing.
Oh,
So
just
yeah,
one other thing. You're talking about Latina. I just thought of AOC talking in her black voice. This is the way I talk, that. And like, do you not realize we have the internet and there's videos of you talking regularly? It's like,
I mean, I do that sometimes too. Like, there's one thing I did realize that I would be doing it. I used to do it a lot more subconsciously, like, and then I got a bit conscious about it, where I would be speaking to certain people from certain places, and my accent would change. And this is more of a thing where people do have. It's not just accents; it's inflection, it's the way they carry themselves, certain slang that they use. And this is a simple thing. Even back in high school, some of my friends, we joke around about certain topics. And with other friends, we wouldn't joke around those certain topics because we haven't talked about it. Like with some of them, like we joke around comics about things like this, talk in a certain way. And then with my female friends, we'd have our own inside stories and things like that. So we talk in a different way. So we don't want to. I'm not too harsh on people with that, because like, let me see if I can do it. Like, I can just change my accent and then I can be speaking like this. If I was
yeah,
speaking to someone else here, I would be speaking like this. This is the way I would be reading this. I would be reading this. He spent months pondering scenarios and talking to experts. It wasn't hard to, if I speak like that now,
yeah,
I don't know how I speak in my dreams. That's the thing. Like, I think I speak more like this in my dreams. But when I'm speaking to people, there is something about mirroring the person you're speaking with, trying to relate to the person. So with that one, I'm not too. I understand coming from politicians, there is an extra aspect of it where, like, the Hillary Clinton, the well-known thing where it's like, I ain't tired no more around here, or something like that. She said, and
yeah.
they're pulling out like things like the hot sauce. That is pandering. But I think the changing of inflections and accents and things like that as you talk to different people, I think, to me, maybe from my background, I'm a little less hard on people for doing that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right, go ahead. I think you're up on the next one.
Yep. All right. Let's see. Next one. It turns out Podhorzer wasn't the only one thinking in these terms. He began to hear from others eager to join forces. The Fight Back Table, a coalition of quote unquote resistance organizations, had begun scenario planning around the potential for a contested election, gathering liberal activists at the local and national level into what they called the Democracy Defense Coalition. Voting rights and civil rights organizations were raising alarms. A group of former election officials were researching emergency powers they feared Trump might exploit. Protect Democracy was assembling a bipartisan election crisis task force. It turned out that once you said it out loud, people agreed, Podhorzer says, and it started building momentum. Thoughts or comments?
Yeah, you see, the fight back table again, saved from what? Fight back from what? And this is what I'm talking about. If you were setting him up as Hitler, however that means Hitler, like I said, when people say, I don't take people that seriously when they say something like racist, when they say something like Hitler, when they say something like Nazi, when I've heard how these people say things like poverty, how people say things like hunger, how people say things like sexual assault, when people talk about micro triggers, these are micro emotions. So it's more like micro racism. It's like micro racist. I'm micro starving. I'm micro hungry. That kind of thing. Where it's like the same way how loose they are with like health at every size. They don't literally mean health at every size. No one really means that.
No.
No one really looks at somebody who's 350 pounds and 5 foot tall and says, yeah, they're just as healthy as
No.
Shaq, who was 6'7" and 350 pounds tall. No one really believes that. But
No.
they say it because people are just very loose on their words. So when somebody says fight back table, it's just a thing. It's kind of how like when the people just change their inflection. It's just a thing that they're doing to kind of communicate. I try to think, okay, what is the actual interior thing below it? So with that aspect, I think I'm going to try to start including that in the way I approach things and take things in my and navigate my reality tunnel. Good,
Well,
yeah, trying to put that lens through things. Go ahead.
when you said that bit about hunger, I thought of that SpongeBob clip I sent you about Patrick with the candy bar. You know, you took my only food. Now I'm gonna starve, and it shows the bellies like
Yeah,
that. That's how people use that expression, though. Oh, I'm starving. I'm starving to death. It's like yeah, you could live off your girth for like a few weeks.
and I'm not just this hard on the left in this situation. The same way you had that person afterwards, like no, that person in the
Yeah.
green coat. I'm seeing some of that on this other end also from the people on the more on the political right. You're like, no, like it's over. America is over. I'm like, if America is over this, then it wasn't really something strong enough to be maintained. Like, have you done everything you can to stop this? What do you literally mean by over? You're like, oh, it's going to be a war. And when I ask people on either end of the spectrum, what do you mean by civil war? Then they're like, okay, I don't really mean people are going to be shooting guns in the street. And I'm like, okay, if that's not what it is, use a different word. Because we still have examples of civil wars. We still have that. Stop saying it's a coup, because there's a coup going on in Myanmar right now. And we've seen what a coup actually looks like. So quit this whole situation of Americanizing everything where it's like, everything's dialed down. If an American talks about a social political issue, I think it's wise in general, unless you know the person, you know they're very exact with their wording. It's wise in general to take that issue, think about the general accepted definition of that term, and then dial it down to like a two, a 2 out of 10. Then that's kind of what they actually mean or feel about that kind of situation, because that's how it goes, and that's something that matches what AOC happened for her. That situation to her personally, she might have experienced it as what an average person would experience as a 10. But because of her lifestyle, her expectations, and her vision, she took what was, when you actually look at the literal threat of what was actually happening in that situation, which is more of a 2, to her, it felt like a 10. Because just the same way, it's just people live in different ways and they have different kind of expectations, and they're going to have different kind of sensitivities to different things depending on their background and their lived experiences. So yeah.
Well, also when you said at the end of America, I thought of that painting, The Fall of Rome, with like the fires and statues and stuff falling. It's like in people's minds, almost like that's what's happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and for some people, what happened in the Capitol was taken up to that 11, that destructive thing. People talking about the right side fire, disgusting. These are horrible people because
Yeah.
no, okay, they're not horrible people. It's horrible that the people are that off in their estimation of what reality is. Because if you know what the Reichstag fire was, like,
Yeah.
come on. Even the Summer of Love was bad, but some of the reactions Americans were having, I was also like, okay, I understand that. It's billions of dollars. Yes, I understand it. But it could be a lot worse. Like,
Yeah.
it's bad. And that's the thing. When you say that, people say you're diminishing this. No, I'm not diminishing it. I'm telling you, we need to deal with it on the actual way that it actually
Yeah.
is. Because if you overreact, you're going to be in a situation where the reaction back to it could be negative. Or you might be in a situation where you feel it's so big that you can't do anything. When it's like, no, it's still at the 2. It's still manageable. So do
Yeah.
participate. Don't be like, oh, it's over. We need to start hunkering down and building the bunker and locking ourselves in there. It's like, no, engage, because it's not that big of a threat yet. If there's an actual lion in front of your door, like, rawr, like, I'm like, okay, hide. That lion's going to eat your face if you go out there. But if it's just like a pissed off house cat, I'm like, it's still a threat, but you can engage that pissed off house cat. Maybe it's a cub. You can take care of that cub and make sure that lion cub doesn't grow up to be like a man eater. Those are
Yeah.
the kind of things that I'm kind of thinking about, and I think is positive of having these conversations and getting more understanding.
Sure.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's it for me.
Okay, so on to the next one. Last paragraph of the section. He spent months pondering scenarios and talking to experts. It wasn't hard to find liberals who saw Trump as a dangerous dictator. Okay, again, that lens. I'm remembering dictator doesn't literally mean dictator. It's
Yeah.
dictator in Americana is something else. he spent months pondering. He spent months pondering scenarios and talking to experts. It wasn't hard to find liberals who saw Trump as a dangerous dictator, but Podhauser was careful to steer clear of hysteria. Good. What he wanted to know was, what he wanted to know was not how American democracy was dying, but how it might be kept alive. The chief difference between the US and the countries that lost their grip on democracy, he concluded, was that America's decentralized election system couldn't be rigged in one fell swoop. That presented an opportunity to shore it up. Fabulous. It's like you can't make this stuff up.
No.
Reality is always more fascinating than fiction. That's one thing that I've constantly noticed, and it's magnificent. Yeah, go ahead.
And I mean, I can't speak for him, obviously, but this whole thing about hysteria and hyperbole just kills me that the left does. What did we hear about Trump? You know, oh, blacks are going to be put in concentration camps. Gays are going to have all their rights taken away. Oh, you know, there's people drawing black themselves in blackface now. It's like none of this is happening. None of this happened. I mean, it's, you know, it's like over the last 4 years, America did not end. You know, it's like, you know, yeah, the right may be saying that now, but it's like these are people who acted like we were on the verge of the next Holocaust, and you know, not even close.
That was the general thing that I was wondering. I was noticing some friends of mine on social media would be posting some things of them watching the inauguration on the screen, having their kids watching and clapping and things like that. Or another one was like, I just moved to a new house, new president, a new house, new administration. And I was thinking, okay, so your lives are going on. Your kids are still going on to school. They're still healthy. They're still okay. You're still living in a good neighborhood. This other person, you had your business going even through the pandemic, enough to actually move to a new house. You found a spouse and things like this. So how was it so terrible and terrifying for you in Trump's America? Like, why are you so glad that you have this new historical, this new amazing, this new relieved? Like, why? What was stressing you out so much over the
Yeah.
last 4 years? And again, this goes to the Americana thing. Maybe but I know people like you who are more level-headed and we agree on certain things. There could be some things where I just don't really get what it is to be an American, to talk about certain slang in certain ways where the issues the average person talks about. And again, I don't want to project the hysteric Antifa type of people yelling, that late woman yelling on the street, like, oh no, type of thing, with just the average person who just says, yeah, Trump is horrible, and just repeats that. So it's what do they mean by these words? What they mean by dictator? These are the kind of things that I'm trying to understand. But here, it's just the wording here. The
I
decentralized
think
can't be rigged, and then presented in, and that's we know that it
yeah,
can't be rigged in one fell swoop, and that's what they
no.
kept saying. Oh, there's no rigging. What do you think? One group just came? It's like, no, I never made that claim. Like
No.
we're talking about the different things that did it, and this is what was mentioned here. We understand that there's ways to actually do this, shore it up, fortify it, without actually committing fraud or rigging things. Like, come on.
Well, to your point about not understanding it with Americans, I think a lot of it is just the echo chamber effect. It's that, you know, these people spend too much time on Twitter. They only watch comedians, read the New York Times, things like that. And they've just insulated themselves so much. They think that their opponents are actual Nazis. Like they think we're out calling for genocide and other things because it's like they've insulated themselves in their echo chamber. And I find it funny because the same people who do that are the ones who complain about people living in echo chambers only reaffirming their own biases. But then these are the same people who brag about, you know, like I remember one of my Facebook friends, I don't know if you have him as well, but he makes fun of the people who brag about unfriending and blocking people. He's like, yes, congratulate me on creating an even tighter echo chamber. And it's like but that's how I view these people. It's like, you know, it's like, I refuse to associate with these people. I am breaking with these people. It's like, you're just retreating further into your own echo chamber where you become more and more detached from what your opponents actually believe. And then you sit there and go, hey, why is the country so polarized? It's like, well, you know, you're not helping the problem here.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. But I think key thing is also here where what I'm trying to one of the things that I've been trying to establish, and I'm going to look forward to doing some more things directly to it, is trying to talk to some of these people, because I'm wondering what the percentage of is. You know, there's bell curves everywhere, so it's like there's going to be a small percentage that takes it very seriously, a small percentage on the other end that doesn't, but is still related, to still talk about it, and then who is in the middle? You know, these people in the middle. Some people on one end will just be trolling. The other people in the end will be living and bleeding that stuff. Think about it when you're thinking about a religion. The average Christian is somebody who goes to church, they pray, they believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he rose to heaven after 3 days. They don't go into gospels, they can't quote you things, and they won't go into
No.
like analytics of how does it really work if there's a triune God. Is it really a triune deity? Are they really all the same individual? If you start telling them like, what do you think happened with Jesus when during those 3 days? Did he literally die? Or since he's still the three beings, did his consciousness just go to another being? Or did his consciousness really end for 3 earthly days? And then all of a sudden, like a third of God came back. They wouldn't get into that kind of stuff. But then there's people on the end who are fundamentalists, who are theologians, who will go into the deep stuff. Some of them will be on one end of academic, who's trying to understand it. Some on the other end will be on the whole, no, it's written the way it is, and we will kill you if you even doubt these things. And some on the other side will just not believe any of the things, but completely understand. This is the other side of the bell curve. Will completely understand that we can use this for our own benefits and study it also in some cases, or just troll people or things like that, where they don't believe any of it and they're doing it entirely because of the social benefits. So that's kind of how it is, I think, with politics. Most of the
Yeah.
people in the middle are like, Democrats seem okay. Joe Biden seems to be nice enough guy. I liked his wife coming on and telling us about walking with dogs and wearing masks. Like, seems to be nice. Seems to be unity and all these things. But that Trump guy, he was on there with the bluster, bro. But when you come down and you ask him, do you really care about democratic policies? Do you really care about what Trump actually said? What do you know? They don't really care. That's the middle of
No.
the people. And
Yeah.
then what's the percentage on the edges? Because I think the edge kind of people are the people who are activating most of the intent, and both the average people in the middle will look at the ends of the people on the right, and then they'll like broad brush everyone with that.
Yeah.
And then both people on the right will look at the people on the ends and then broad brush everyone on the left in that.
Yeah.
When that's not necessarily the case. So I don't know.
And to sort of add to my last point too, I mean, we're all guilty of confirmation bias to a point. I mean, obviously a lot of my friends agree with me. I spend a lot of time on Mises wiki, all that. Like, we're all guilty of it, but it's also like, if you really want to become a true thinker and understand the bigger picture, you have to talk to people who disagree with you. You have to put your arguments to the test. And that's my issue with a lot of these lefties, is that they just say, well, our opponents have nothing valid to offer, I'm not going to talk to them. And it's like, you don't, that's why you don't actually understand your opponent's beliefs, because you haven't engaged people who hold the beliefs directly and formed your own opinion. You've seen the beliefs edited out of context, mocked, or made fun of, and then you just base it off of that. Like when I first got into Ayn Rand, like read her directly, I was amazed at how misrepresented she was. But it's like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people out there that have only watched like John Oliver's hit piece on her and just based everything off of that. They didn't go and engage the source material. And I thought to myself, like, it would be the equivalent of like a kid who grew up in Nazi Germany saying they understand Judaism. It's like, no, you don't. You've been fed the caricatured
Yeah.
version designed to discredit it. You didn't actually go read the Torah, read the Kabbalah, and say, okay, is this good, bad? What do I think? And that's the issue that I take ultimately.
Yeah, and that's one thing that with most of the people I've talked to who seem to have objections to Trump, I asked them, okay, what actual policies? And it tends to come down to he was just boorish. He seemed to be an ass. They'll mention he called Mexicans rapists. He did not. He said a sentence about specific people, specifically the coyotes, who do actually sexually assault and rape a majority of the females that come across on that very dangerous crossing. They say, oh, he called white supremacists nice people. No, he didn't. He said, like, some of them on both sides were good people, I'm sure. And he said things like that, where it was like, if you look at the actual context of the things, you look at it's a few things that were brought up. He said, grab him by the pussy. He said, he grabs women by the pussy. Some people will tell you there's actually video of him grabbing women by the pussy. There isn't. It was a short thing in literal thing, him talking to some guy and that kind of jovial kind of take. It's stuff. It's not videos of him sniffing little girls' hair and
No.
touching them in weird ways and things like that. It's not that, but even that could be taken in a different context. So it's these are the kind of things where, okay, so those, and to me that's more promising, because like you said, the people in Germany are not going to get a good idea of what the Germans actually are about. I mean, the Jewish people actually about. I talk to most people who dislike Trump, and they don't actually go to policies. They don't actually go to things he actually did.
No.
They make nebulous things about, oh, he should have said this, he should have worn a mask, he should have done this. But if you personally thought you wearing a mask was positive anyway, him not wearing a mask, how is that going to change anything? Now that Biden wears a mask sometimes, he's now done this law, like, oh, you're in public transport, or no, this mandate and things like that, but he signs a mandate and he doesn't walk it, but he was celebrating, so it's okay. What is going on with this kind of thing? It was very surface level stuff. And again, it's the Americana type of stuff. And maybe it's not just Americana. Maybe I'm being too xenophobic or something to do with xeno something with that. Maybe being dismissive, because there was a time when I was kind of surface level on some of these things too, but I started plunging the depths of them and like, okay, why do I believe this? If I'm going to become an American, what is this country about politically? Started digging into some of the things. Is it really a racist place? Would I want to join a country that's racist when I could live other places? So these are kind of questions where I think most people who are Americans haven't really had to ask those questions. They kind of just were indoctrinated or grown up or learned certain behaviors in the communities that they were in, and this default went in there. And you have an article like this that again has come out and they've admitted that yes, we have control of the media. Yes, we have control of these institutions. Yes, we have these secret cabals working. So now people can kind of drop that inane thing they used to say that we are the resistance. Resistance to what?
Yeah,
resistance,
reality,
resistance
reality.
that has the majority of the billionaires in the world actually coming like supporting you.
Yeah,
You're the resistance, and you have Dr. Fauci, who's been in politics for how many years? For 47
decades.
years.
Yeah,
One of the top paid public servants. He's part of your resistance. Bill Gates, billionaire, part of your resistance. You go to Davos, the meeting of the world leaders of all the world, the World Economic Forum. They're touting what the resistance is saying. What are
yeah.
you resisting? Like, what is
Reality,
going on?
just reality.
So, hopefully, at least that aspect can be finally laid to rest. People will still say it, but I think it can be laid to rest now.
Well, there were two
Okay.
points I was going to make too. The good people on both sides, that thing annoyed me because if you watch the full speech in context, he was talking about people who wanted to keep up with the statues. Like there are a lot of Southerners who just see that as part of their identity. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, we can get into the merits of what was the South fighting for, why is that, but they're not doing it because they're cheering slave ownership. They see it as this is part of our heritage and all that. And he specifically said that. And he said, no, white supremacists, white nationalists, they should be condemned. But he was talking about people who wanted to keep the statues up. But the fact that a lot of people think he was referring to white nationalists, white supremacists, when he specifically said no, it proves you live in an echo chamber because you only saw that speech that was doctored to have it that edited out. And it's like you can't claim to be well informed if you don't know the full context. And the other thing too, it annoys me a lot is people on the left when I bring up stuff like this hypocrisy and double standards, they always just do this, oh, you're engaged in whataboutery or whataboutism. It's like, no, I'm holding you to the standards you claim to value. You say these things are important, and then you break those rules. It's like, are they really important? If you're so hung up on believe all women, you look the other way with Tara Reid. If you're hung up on kids in cages but didn't say anything under Obama, you don't actually care about these things. You're just team signaling. Now, if you say, I'm just biased towards the Democrats, I favor them automatically, and I'm willing to excuse them, okay, that would be the honest take. But if you're going to give me convoluted rationales as to this is okay when my side does it, it's the worst thing ever when the other side does it, you don't actually care about those things. You're just team signaling. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like principle. This meme. I think I did post it up. It was a meme I took that was something from my days of being in the anti-theist community and getting memes and being looking more into that. There was something about how religion is not personal; it's political. Then I switched it around to being like politics is not rational; it's religious, and politics itself is it's anti-principles. Politics itself, you can't really be a successful politician and be principled. It's about what's practical. It's about what's possible. It's not about the principles. It's not about saying this is wrong, so I'm going to just stick on this. I campaigned on this. I'm going to stick on this. It's about saying I need to say this in order to get there. Once
Yeah.
I'm there, now I need to maintain this, or I need to maintain my position here, and I have all these other people that paid for this or that donated to this. And in order to get back in and get my next position to actually still be here, I have to do these kind of things. So yes, this might have been a thing that they might even personally care about it, but they realize as a politician, I have to do what's practical. I have to do what's political. And I'm going to actually take that and I'm going to say, okay, I can't do that anymore. Like no one really thinks that like Joe Biden is some kind of moron or
No.
okay, some people really do think that, but he's not.
No.
He's old and he might be having some old person issues, but he's of enough basic intelligence to know the words that he's saying. Enough people
Yeah.
around him to understand some things and saying. These people who were coming out and campaigning in Georgia when they said, we're going to give you $2,000 if you vote for us. They
Yeah.
knew what they were saying.
Yeah.
They knew what $2,000 meant.
Yeah.
They also practically understood that before, and they had also mentioned this before the runoff election had to come by, that it was going to be 1,400. And I knew it was never going to get up to the two. I did think I would be very surprised if it was going to be bumped up to the 2,000. I just thought, like, look, they already gave 6, and the reason when Trump said let's get it up to 2, and they said no, oh, we have to wait until after. Trump pulled one. He pulled a good one on them. Trump
Yeah.
should have been more like that. His whole, and I was expecting that to be the kind of Trump that we'd see in the second term of Trump, just coming out and being more of a wrecking ball type of character. But he was also being political. He had
Yeah.
also decided in his first term to be more practical and hire certain insider people and get certain things and not push that hard because he was thinking, I need to get a second term, so I need some people on my side.
Yeah.
But when you have this, they say, okay, we need to have some shore up. We need to have something that we're going to run on after. So we're going to keep that 1,400 to make it up to that 2,000 because they couldn't come out and say, no, Trump, you're crazy. That's too much money. They said, we can't do it now. But once
Yeah.
they saw the reaction to the 2,000 and people agreeing, like, yeah, we can't just give these presidents $600. Like, we got to give them up to 2. They already mentioned, like, because they had already talked about, can we bump it up to 14? And then they said, okay, we can't do it now, but we will do it after the election. Then the election came out to be questionable. Then the Georgia thing came up. And then they started saying $2,000 checks will go out.
Yeah.
They know the difference between $2,000 checks and $1,400 checks to match to make it up to that $2,000. That
Yeah.
messaging was changed, and
Yeah.
they made a very political decision to say we're taking a risk. We're going to get a hit after when we drop it down to 1,400.
Yeah.
But the chances of us getting more people to vote for us by a few people, maybe a few 10,000 people who think, oh, then it's not the 1,400. Now it's actually 600 more. The 600 we got and 600 more. The people who thought that, that's on you. You're
Yeah.
not aware enough about politics. For you to actually have believed that and not noticed that switch, you're not that politically aware. You're not that
Yeah.
politically savvy, and not everyone is. People know more about makeup industry than I do. People
Yeah.
know more about the basketball games than I do. When I watch basketball, I don't go in there with my analysis and say, "Oh, I think this is the place. This is going to happen. This person is going to get traded there," because I'm not aware of that stuff.
No.
But people think they know more about politics. I could tell. So now you have that backlash, but the backlash comes. But so what? You're not going to take these people out of office. Joe
No.
Biden is the sitting president. They have the House. They have the Senate. So what are they going to care? Like, okay, you're going to be mad. You're not going to vote for us in 2022.
Yeah.
And we don't care. By then, we're going to have a whole different thing. You're going to have forgotten about all this stuff by then. So that's the kind of things they kind of do. Yeah.
Well, and also, I think Biden said he's only doing one term, right? Because he's up there. So I think he said
Yeah.
at one point, yeah. So it's like he'll finish out his term if Kamala doesn't kill him or something. But it's like he sees it as, okay, I'll do this for a few years. This will be my crowning achievement, and then go retire. Do whatever.
As I mentioned before, this election was very much about being against Trump, and
Yeah.
even before, I think when I started paying some attention to politics back in the 2000s, might have been, I think, very early 2000, when I started actually just giving more attention. One thing that made me very cynical to begin with was already just noticing that it's a lot easier to run on campaign on why you should not vote for somebody rather than convince people to why they should vote for you. Much campaigning is that person sucks. That person is going to do this. That person didn't do this. That person won't do this. Instead of this is what I'll do.
Yeah.
This is the things that I believe in. This is how it's like that person believes in that. If you put that person, your kids are going to be in trouble because of that guy. It's not that I'm going to protect your kids this way. So there's a lot of that and people understand. If you come in and you say things that you're going to do, you can get held on that. But being political, and this is why I love someone like AOC, LUV, not LOVE, because I'm very particular in my terms. LUV with like the hearts and the emoji type of thing. Because she's not somebody who is wily in that sense. She just comes out and says things. You're like, oh my God, you just said that? That's awesome. She's showing you what the room. You're looking at the room. Because people like AOC are like, here's the spotlight. People like Trump are like, here's the spotlight. People like Nancy Pelosi are going to be like, curtain. You ain't seeing behind here. People like Lindsey Graham, like, curtain. You ain't seeing behind here. So it's been a lot harder for me to actually have conversations in politics about people because people just see the curtain. They see the stage.
Yeah.
But now we live in a time where people are seeing behind the curtain. People are seeing how the things are. Not just seeing behind the curtain. They know who the producers are. They know like the scripts. They know who's being picked ahead of time to possibly cast. Somebody gets fired. They understand this person got fired because they said this thing, and then this other person was brought in. They see all these things. So now it's a lot. To me, somebody who's this much of an infoholic, somebody who's this much into politics, you are too. I think we watch politics like most people watch sports and things like that. So like for us, it's like more people are getting aware of a field that we're interested in. and they're being more conversant on it because I don't have to convince people as much and go into like, no, because this is really what's happening. People can actually see it. I can just be like, look, can we talk about this now? And then the people are like, okay, let's talk about that now. So it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about. Like the debt. Imagine this debt. Like we were just joking around. Like I just did a post where we were posting. I think we were talking about like the debt before the the coronavirus thing came in. And then it's just like, what is it? What is the debt of the United States of America now?
Is it like 26 trillion or something, or is it
Yeah,
more than that?
it's like doubled in a year. It's crazy. So some of these kind of things, like people didn't understand it when it was just in the background.
Yeah.
You had to walk around New York and see the debt clock. But now millions more of Americans understand the issue with debt and the government just printing out money and these kind of things. Like they get that now. And that's a good thing. And as the Americans go, the rest of the world still goes on as we're becoming more globalized and plugged in and connected and things like that. And this is good. We're going back to pre social media politics in a social media awareness world, and we're about to see some very exciting things. Okay,
Well,
so
you know who brought up the national debt first as a campaign issue?
ooh,
Ross Perot, when he was
oh
running
wow,
against, yeah, because he brought it up because under Reagan it went up by about 3 trillion, which at the time was a ton. And because remember, if you look at the debt in the previous administrations, it went up a bit. I think Eisenhower was the last Republican president to balance the budget, and then
yeah,
Carter, I guess there was a little bit of a deficit, but that was because the economy was so bad. But then with Reagan, of course, he blew it up with all the military spending. And then Perot said, look, this is a serious issue. I'm a businessman. I can straighten this out, all that. And then, of course, people talked about, okay, Clinton was projected to have surpluses, but that's because the economy was in a bubble. And then Bush, of course, and then Obama even more. And then now it's, out of sight.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a cool thing to think about.
Yeah.
Some of these things, like human beings have been around for at least as Homo sapiens for I think it's 200,000 years. But the as primates as mammals, we've been around for much longer. There's
Yeah.
epigenetics. There's the way we work. There's the ways our brains adjust to certain things. Some things are so new. Social media is such a new convention. The internet is such a new convention. Even things like governments, like the states, with this kind of debt and going off fiat currency, like
Yeah.
these things are so new. Like we shouldn't think. There's another thing I did correct from the last video. I'd said we're talking about being post-history, and I was like, oh, we are post-history. We're actually postmodernism. I wanted to say we are not post-history. We're actually in a post-critical theory world. But we're kind of in a situation, something like the field of economics is very, very new. It's something
Yeah.
that just was invented. Even it was shortly before critical theory, and I think critical theory is kind of the reflection. It's like the yin and the yang to maybe postmodernism might fit that more. Like postmodernism is more kind of the yang to an economic way of approaching the world and things like that. It's more about fields and
Yeah.
possibilities, whereas the economics is more just like, okay, these are the decisions, these are the actions.
Yeah.
So that's once that actually gets to a thing where the average person has an average understanding of what the field of economics has actually started touching and as a way to understand why people do things, I think the world is going to be a much better place. So there's some of the
Yeah.
things that people are very distraught about, but it's not as bad as, as people might think. And again, this
Yeah.
article, I think there was many questions, and them coming out and saying this is actually what we were doing, I think it's going to calm it down for a bit for some people who just have all these question marks. Because that was part of my main issue with these court cases being thrown out on standing and all these things. Oh,
Yeah.
it hasn't been heard. The case hasn't been
No.
heard. I just wanted some of these things to be addressed, and this is addressing some of them. But as we're mentioning this, we've been doing this part for an hour, right? Do you want to like stop now, or do you want to keep
Yeah.
it
We
going?
we can stop. This could be part two.
Okay, so this will be part two, and we'll do these. I think we'll try to get to a point where at least the actual part of discussing the thing, you will section by section, but limited to about an hour. And you can do hour parts. I don't
Yep.
know. You want to record the next one tomorrow, or you want to record the next one right now?
We can record it right now. I was going to take a break, but
Okay.
we could come back and do this.
Okay.
I think about an
So
hour segment or so is good. It's not super long. So
okay. So for those who are listening to this part two, thanks for us. That was the architect. That was that section. We've done part one, which is from the intro. The next part is going to be the alliance. I'm going to get these out, like as Stephen mentioned, to take a break, and then we're going to record the next part for the alliance. For this architect part, I'm going to actually do the post-production on it and get it up as soon as possible. That's done, and then get the alliance the next day. I try to get these ones out on a daily basis as the story is still hot. Because even for me personally, like I'm not reading the rest of the story. I'm not listening to the people who I know, the podcast I know, listen like No Agenda Show, and Viva Frey is going to come on tonight. Viva Barnes is going to come on tonight. There's other people who've been doing some commentary on it. I don't want to hear what they say about it until I've actually read it, so I'm kind of holding back on that. So I want to record these as fast as possible, get them out there, and I can hear what these other guys and other people, guys, gals, and everything else in between have said about it. But thank you guys for listening, guys, gals, and everything else in between. Also, anything you want to say to them before you sign off for this part?
Nope, that's it. Okay. I enjoyed this too.
Okay, so that's it for part one. So that's it for the architect. Coming back next with the Alliance.
Sure, of course. All right.